I should say my dad is a Marine because you never stop being a Marine. Got to get that right. Military peeps. All right. I'm going to start out this morning a little differently than I have started out the other mornings, and then we're going to have some fun. But I was reading in Psalm this morning, and I just want to share it with you. A Psalm you guys have heard countless times before, and I think sometimes we skip over it just because of the number of times we've heard it, right? You ever do that? Sometimes you've heard a scripture so many times, like you go to read it in your devos, and you're like, yep, know what it says, and you keep on going. This morning, I'm reading through the Psalms right now for my personal devos, just really enjoying them. And this morning, I hit Psalm 23. Such a good one. But it's so used so often, sometimes we don't actually stop and pause and look and say, what does that actually say? And so I just want you guys, I know you've done your devos this morning, but I just wanted to pause with you guys this morning because I just enjoyed it so much. And I want you guys to just, let's just pause and enjoy a psalm this morning. So Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This psalm has two beautiful, beautiful word pictures in it. First word picture, what is it? Sheep. Sheep and a shepherd. Any of y'all spent time around sheep? Name the first characteristic you think of with sheep. They're dumb. Scared, skittish, dumb. But they're kind of friendly. I mean, you gotta love them. Yeah, but if there's something stupid to do, they're gonna do it. If there's somewhere to get trapped, they're going to get trapped there. If there's a wrong choice, the sheep are probably gonna make it, right? Yeah. And you think about that in this first word picture here, who's the sheep? Isn't that so sad? The characteristics of a sheep. David's comparing that to us, or to himself. And we look at that. And I think about that, and I'm like, Lord, I don't want to be a sheep. But in reality, guess what I am? Oh, man, do I make dumb decisions. I can see two decisions in front of me. There's the right, there's the wrong. Oh, look where I just went. And I don't mean to, but I do dumb things sometimes, right? Like I know the right that I should do, and I do the wrong. I mean, I think Paul had something about that to say. But we're just sheep. We're just sheep sometimes. But I look at here what the shepherd does. Let's look at the verbs that the shepherd does here. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But what's God doing? What's God doing? So let's just look at the verbs. Makes me lie down. Why does someone, think about a mom with a toddler. Why does a mom make a toddler lie down? They're exhausted. How many of you have been to the point where you're like, you know you need a nap, but you're not taking it? How many of you are like, kind of right now? A little bit? Yeah, a little bit. It's all right. You can confess it. I kind of felt that way when my alarm went. Actually, this morning I was not woken up by my alarm. I was woken up by people who were texting me because they're in a different time zone than me, and so they're texting me at 4:30. And I'm like, you all just shush. But yeah, so yeah, you guys have probably been there too. And you're like, no, just shush. But yeah, but the Lord knows when you need rest. Have you ever been there where the Lord puts you in a situation like, okay, it's time to rest. Have a cold. The Lord puts you in a situation where it's like, the Lord's like, okay, you're a little stressed out. You're just gonna sit here for a second with someone who needs someone to talk to. The Lord's like, hey, you need a rest. Here's this really pretty setting that you know you have this list to do, but you're just going to sit and admire it for a minute. There's lots of different ways, but the Lord is going to provide you with opportunities to rest. Let's look at the next one here. The Lord, what's the next verb? Leads. He leads me beside still waters. Why is he leading to water? Refreshment. Have you ever been hangry? Yeah. And when you're hangry, you don't need a Snickers. You actually need food that's going to fill you, right? You need food that's going to be, that's what God's doing. He's giving you the refreshment that you need. Take a look at the next one there. He restores my soul. Ever been just emotionally exhausted? Yeah. Sometimes it's a good emotionally exhausted. Sometimes it's you've been spending so much on other people, you get emotionally exhausted. Sometimes it's because there's so much drama in other people in our life that you're just exhausted. God can restore that. Look at the roles that God is doing for us as shepherd. What's the next one? He leads me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. See, when we follow the Holy Spirit who he put in our hearts, it's a lot harder to make those dumb decisions. The more we're in tune with the Holy Spirit, the more we make those right decisions. The more we're in the Word, the more we're listening to the Holy Spirit, the less dumb sheep-like we are. Isn't that such a cool thing? I love this first part of this psalm. And then you look at that next part. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I will fear no evil. So in other words, even though I'm a dumb little stupid sheep making stupid decisions, and I'm surrounded by the stupid world that's doing stupid stuff and making it a very scary place to live, I will fear no evil. For God is with me because of all that list before. All that list before is surrounding me, there to comfort me, to hem me in, to put a margin around me that makes me safe. Here's a weird little fact. They actually did a study. There was an elementary playground that had a fence around it. And the kids were out there on this playground, running, playing, all over this playground. It was about an acre-sized playground. There was playground equipment, there were balls, there was room for them to play soccer. Kids were already all over it exploring, elementary kids. How many of you would have been all over that playground? Where would you have been? Soccer, swings, slide? Where would you have been? Slide, yeah. Where would you have been? The field? Where would you have been, Dana? Swings? You're going to try to see if you can kick a star, aren't you? Maybe. Where would you have been? Swings. You would have been hanging out with Dana, holding hands. Yeah, you guys know where you would have been. Here's the interesting thing. So this playground, you guys know where you would have been on the playground. You would have been all over that thing. And then when you would have got bored, you would have gone somewhere else, right? Had a fence. Kids were all over it, all over that playground. They took the fence off the playground because they were doing some construction. Kids huddled up in the middle and only used one set of equipment. They quit playing soccer. They quit using the other equipment. They quit playing the games over here because they did not know where it was safe. Nobody told them they could no longer use these things, but they didn't know where it was safe. They just used the middle. They put the fence back in because they were done. Guess what the kids did? They had a boundary. We read your rod and your staff, and it sounds like punishment, but all it is that fence that tells us where we're safe. Because we are dumb little sheep. We need that boundary. His word is going to provide you that boundary that you have. And so I'm just going to stop there with that word picture this morning, and I want you just today be comforted by Psalm 23 as I was this morning. I hope you were. I hope you were comforted by Psalm 23. Use that. Be comforted by that. Thanks for indulging me. Thanks for indulging me in that. How many of you were here last night for The Edge? I see quite a few of you. Yes, I recognize you now without your wigs. They look so cute in their wigs. Did you guys get pictures? Did you get pictures of all of these guys? Your straight green wig was fantastic. The orange face paint was fantastic. Did it take forever to get that face paint off? You're like, it's still there in your beard. All right, the reason I ask is because Kyler's message last night, for those of you that were here, Kyler's message about 20 minutes long. Did you catch the hook, book, look, took? Got it? All right, let's talk through it here. For those of you here last night, let's divide up. So those of you that were here at the edge last night, raise your hand. Raise your hand tall. Those of you that were here at the edge last night that think you could give a summary of Kyler's message, keep your hand up tall. Let's divide. Are there two of you? We got two of you? Half of you go back there with Ainsley. The other half of you stay up here with Lord. You're going to summarize his message, and you're just summarize the message. All you have to do is say, this is what he said. Okay? So half of you go back there. The other half up here, listen to the summary. Go. I'll give you you're summarizing, so I'll give you 3 minutes. Half. You pick your half. You pick your half. But I'm going to grab my water bottle.
Just edges.
Kyler brought dogs.
Dude, I was trying to.
Okay, half of you got to go to the back.
Is it everybody or just
No, everybody go. Everybody go. Everybody go. Everybody go. You got to hear what Kyler said. Those of you who were at the edge last night, help those who are summarizing fill in the message. Everybody go. Did you get it? All right. Pull out a piece of scratch paper. Go ahead. What was his topic? What was his main point? Or his topic or main point? What was his hook, book, look, took? From what you could remember, from what you remember. See if you can find it. Because it was in there. So you guys stay here, stay here, stay here. Stay here, work together, because there were those who were here, and you've heard now what he said. So pull out a piece of scratch paper, write down what was his topic, what was his main idea. You don't have to get his objectives, but what was his hook, book, look, took. See if you could piece it backwards. I know some of you weren't there, but you've heard the story now. You heard what he taught.
okay?
Okay, make sure you include these guys who weren't there, because they heard the summary now. Yeah, but what specifically about Willy Wonka? Well, they could tell you. It wasn't just Willy Wonka, it was. There we go, right here. He had the answer. It wasn't just the golden ticket is what?
Oh, this is like, you don't need that thing.
Yeah.
And the dog. A hug flies little. And like the golden ticket and like good things and really positive things and like threw the ticket in the trash and it was worthless.
It's like, whoa, I noticed you like the peak, you know. It's like, yeah, because it's a hand hug. Hand hug.
Hand hug.
Yeah.
Only intended for persons 18 or older. That's
Let's talk with these guys. They were there.
it's not for every Catholic. Like, maybe, I mean, maybe not.
What was he doing with the dog poop?
Get in a bag, yeah, just get squishy.
But why?
Because it's rubbish.
But what was he explaining?
That we don't want.
But what was he specifically explaining?
Good question.
He had it in yellow. Yeah.
And it looked like
He was explaining that word and what it meant. So here's the verse, here's the content, here's what it means. So what part does that fit under? Where we study it and what it means. The book. The book. See how you can even put fun, goofy stuff in the book. Because what he was doing is going back to this word rubbish that we think of as trash. He was explaining what in the actual Greek that would have meant. That's not like just like trash. That's like dog poop. But he did it in a really creative way. Yeah, so that was part of the book. But it was real quick at their level. Yeah. Yeah. Because he's explaining what those words mean. Yeah, because we just look at it, we're like, trash. And he's like, no, no, no. Not just trash. It's rubbish. And you're not going to get that one out of your head for a while. That poor girl who grabbed that bag. Like at the beginning, you could put them as part of your hook, like it was a really long hook. But because those games didn't connect to his message, like that, what was his main idea? Right, valuable, that God is valuable, more valuable than anything. Because they didn't connect to that valuable thing, I would put them more as part of his ministry program of outreach, because he's leading a ministry program. But when it came down to his actual lesson, that was only that 20 minutes. So that's one of those weird fuzzy things. Yeah. So I would think what he was doing in here would be part of that. Yeah. Okay, how'd you do? Did you get it?
Yep.
Got it? Oop, you got one in the wrong spot. That one. So those of you who were there last night, what was he doing with the dog poop? But no, what was his purpose?
Yeah, it was rubbish.
Yes, it was a word. So what's he doing
So
when
it's
he,
a book.
it was book. He was making sure they understood what the passage said. Because we hear the word rubbish and we think British person saying trash, right? Yeah, but it doesn't mean that. He's going back to explain what rubbish in that context actually means, that it's like nastiest of all nasty trash. It's not connecting to today, it's connecting us, he's explaining the word. So the look in this was when he then began to say, going back to the golden ticket concept, and saying, You have these things going on in your life. Are they rubbish? So he connected again. But when he actually had him touch the dog poop, that was the book.
Or
Yeah.
Zoe.
I know that. I felt for that girl. She was game. She's game though.
She is fine with like anything, but also like I feel bad.
You got to know which kid to pick when you do
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And Kyler would have knew. Yeah. 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 See how that works? You see how he did that though? Now that you look back on it, you're like, oh. And then the took. What was his took? Yeah.
Yeah, what is
The took is the simple thing that they can do at the end of the lesson that allows them to create a plan. Yes, so his message is God is more valuable than anything. And so he's saying, here's 3 things you can do. You can accept Christ, you can go talk to someone, or you can pray. And so he said the ABCs of what you could do, the back patio if you need to talk to someone about anything, or, so he gave them 3 things that they could do as part of their took. Yeah, so that's how he did that. Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna check up here. Did you guys catch his took last night?
No.
So the took is the part that makes it practical, or at the end, the things that they can take home, but you're making the plan in there. So at the end of his lesson, what was he saying that they could do now, but would lead to out of the classroom? That would be part of the look. Back patio, ABCs. Okay? His point was God is more valuable than anything. So here's 3 possible steps you could do. You could accept Christ. You could talk to someone about what's valuable in your life. Or you could find someone to pray with. Back there in the back patio, they had people to pray with. That was his took. And so you could see how for dynamics that gives them something to do. I just need someone to talk to. Or I need someone to pray with me because I don't know what I want to do. Or I'm ready to accept Christ. So it gave them that tangible something to do. But it was here in class. But they also could do it out of class. See how that worked? Yeah. But when he was saying, yeah, when we compared the dog poop to the things in our life, that was the look. Yeah. So he actually didn't have any activity in his look. He was just talking, which is an interesting thing. Well, that would be in the book part when he was explaining it. Yeah. Yeah. All right, you guys can come on back in. You guys can come on back in. The more you get practice teaching, the more you play with these, you can find this. You can find this online to help guide you more. Hook, book, look, took, you'll find it online. Because I didn't create it. I borrowed it in Jesus' name. All right. So yesterday, you guys were at your tables, and you were working on lessons. How many of you, as you were working on lessons, put in a question? Like you were going to ask a student a question. It's like, I don't know what was on my table. You had to check to see what they were doing. Yeah. How you guys, okay, every table yesterday I know had in at least, you were going to ask the kids, or ask your students at least one question, right? Did you write your question down? Yeah? Somebody give me an example of a question you're going to ask. Lily's got your notes.
Like when we disobey, what does our turning point look like?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do you guys know why her question's good?
What did she say?
Say it again loud.
When we disobey God, what does our turning point look like?
Don't think about the actual answer to the question, but think about Why would the structure of that question be a good question?
It's not like objective, so you can get a bunch of different answers.
You get a bunch of different answers. We're going to talk about how to ask good questions. Somebody else give me a question, because that's a good question. Somebody else give me a good question. A question you had. It doesn't have to be a good, there is no such thing as a good, bad question. Yeah, Ainsley.
We just had like basic questions in the book section for reviewing to make sure they understood. So
Give me an
it's
example.
where was Jonah supposed to go?
Great. And tell them your age group.
Kindergarten.
Perfect questions. Why is that perfect for kindergartners? It fits their development, right? Yeah, it's simple. We want to check to do these kindergartners understand the story. So where did Jonah go? Heaven. Right? We want to make sure they actually know he went to Nineveh, right? They're probably going to answer you in fish, but or a whale, whichever way you tell the story. But that's what we want to do. So somebody else, give me an example of your question.
What was God's purpose for the plant?
Okay, and so there's a specific answer you're looking for there, right? So you've read the passage, and this gives them a chance. Who's going to dig into that question, and what learning style is going to dig into that question and be like, ooh, I know? Analytics, because they're going to know the right answer because you read the passage. We're going to take a look at this. I've been, as you guys have heard, I think I mentioned this. So I teach 2 different subjects at Summit Christian College where I teach. I teach education and I teach church history. We're what's called a micro college, which means we're really a small college. We are about the same size as what you guys here are, what you guys are. We're very small. Our class sizes are somewhere between 5 and 8 students in a class. It's a really cool environment to teach in. I love it. Occasionally I get a big class, like your size, like in my freshman classes, but most of the time I'm teaching upper level junior, senior classes, and they're small. Having to be at a micro college, I'm dual degreed, which makes it kind of fun for me. My brain operates in 2 very different spaces. But because I teach history, and Summit is kind of a unique college in the fact that our classes start at 7:30 in the morning. Go ahead and give me the look you would have at class at 7:30 in the morning. If some of you have your eyes closed, that's fine. Yeah, 7:30 history class. What would you look like? Yeah, that is the. I've seen that look. They used to start at 7. We switched to 7:30, and so that's. I love to teach history, but one of the things I had to do is I had to make history come alive for students. We're talking about people who died a long time ago and facts that people don't care about unless you're super nerdy. And so how do I make history come alive? And so I ask a lot of questions. And because it's early in the morning, I often get this look that you just gave me. And I get it. I mean, I asked them how they were doing. It's a tough question. So I have to think, okay, how do I ask this? Get them their coffee, get them going. How do I ask questions? How do I ask questions that get students talking? How many of you in your teaching, in your devotions, have ever asked a question of your class and just gotten that blank stare back? Isn't that the freakiest thing? You're like, was I speaking English? Was I speaking the same language? You ask the question and you're like, did they hear me? What's happening? Or you ask a question and they go, yes. You're like, I'm pretty sure that wasn't a response. But one of the things you can learn to do to make your teaching more powerful is learn to ask better questions. One of the things that I talk about is that we call that blank stare. You might call it crickets, like there's a cricket in the room, because you can hear the crickets. I tease Ted, my husband, who's with me this week, because he jokes that when he was preaching and he would ask a question and there was nothing and there would be silence. Ted is a sci-fi nerd, and so in his head would go, the silence, it tasks me. You've seen Star Trek, you get that? Yeah, I can tell from the grins who have seen Star Trek and those of you who have not. I only get it because I married Ted and it's been 25 years. But but yeah, the silence tasks you. You don't want silence when you ask a question. You want people to respond. So what do you do? What do you do? I'm going to talk about the reason we get silence first. Here's the reasons you're probably getting silence. One of the reasons is that we fail to prepare. Like, what happens is we like questions. We've seen good teachers ask questions. Like, you guys have mentioned this already. Apparently, Rick is like the king of asking good questions. Yeah? Tell me a question that Rick has asked that got you guys going, and like 45 minutes later, you're like, whoa. Do you have an example?
Who is right?
Who is right? Oh, when talking about moral relativity. You guys all back there in that discussion now? Yeah. What's some other questions that you guys have heard that you're like, got you guys going?
Every time I watch a movie, he asks questions.
Like, what is a pastor, elder, deacon, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, so there was some stuff you had to know, but then you had to go put it into your own words. Yeah.
Makes them what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing. He's got years of teaching experience. Rick does. He's got years of teaching experience, and he's preparing for those things. In order to ask good questions, we have to prepare for them. Questions are one of the best tools in a teacher's toolbox, but you have to think ahead and say, what is my purpose? What are my objectives? What am I trying to get accomplished here? And how do I ask the best questions to get there? But the challenge is we're busy. We're trying to hurry to get our lesson done. So we just put into our notes, ask a question. Ask a question about, or talk about, or follow up with. And so what we get are crickets, or the silence will task you, depending on who you are. I'm not naturally skilled at asking questions. I have to actually think ahead and think about, what is my objective? Who are you? And what's something that might be a roadblock that's in your thinking? What's something that might be part of your context? I have to tell you, for you guys, it was really a challenge because I had never met any of you, and y'all coming from way different places. From different church backgrounds, from different locations, from different family backgrounds. You all are, while there's close in age, you're different ages, different experiences. And so going, okay, what are they going to have? That's a big difference. And so trying to think, okay, what questions are they going to ask? That took some thinking. That took some mental aerobics to kind of think through some of those. There's some general questions that I knew you might ask, but some I didn't know. And so I had to think about it. How many of you have ever got a question that went flat because you didn't prepare? Can I get an oops, my bad? You can say it, oops, my bad. Oops, my bad. There you go. Yeah, me too. Oops, my bad. All right. Sometimes we fail because we ask the wrong question. I asked you to give me your questions that you asked because there's different types of questions. You didn't think about it, but there's different types of questions. Because often we fail to prepare and we're winging it a little bit, or because we're not naturally skilled, we'll ask a question that goes plop. And sometimes, because I'm not actually asking the question I want to know, I get the wrong answer. So let me give you an example from a class I've been in. From a class I've been in, the teacher asked, who remembers what we talked about last week? How many of you have been in Bible study or Sunday school where they asked that? How many of you are like really hoping they don't call on you when they ask that question? You're like, all of a sudden I'm shrinking, hiding behind you so that teacher doesn't call, right? You've been there? Yeah. You never remember what they well, maybe you remember. Maybe you took notes because then you're like, can answer that question. Unless it was a really terrific lesson. Did you know that's not actually what the teacher's asking? I mean, they'd love it if you remembered what they talked about last week. Generally, when we're asking that question, we are trying to see who took what we taught, who took the objectives, and applied it. So go to your objectives that you wrote. The better question would be, last week we talked about David and Goliath. How did you face your fears like David? How many of you would be prepared to answer that question? Do you see how it's a different question? You can answer that question. Sometimes we flop because we're not asking the right kind of question. How many of you have asked the wrong question? Can I get an oops, my bad? Oops, my bad. Yeah, we fail because of that. Another reason we fail is we fail because we forget to bring people into the same brain space we're in. We forget to bring them into the same page we're on. You spend time preparing your lesson. You study that Bible passage. You think about your objectives. You've been planning your activities, your games, your object lessons. Your brain is there. It's wrapped up in what you're thinking about. And so you're going to ask a question, and your brain is prepared for it. Your students, this is the first time they've heard it. And so you're coming out of left field for them. And they're like, humming a who? What are you talking about? Are you sure that's in the Bible? What? And they don't know what you're talking about. They just don't know. And so you have to do this a lot. And so you really have to ask. Sometimes we say, what does Goliath's armor and weaponry reveal about him? Well, I've read that story, but I have no idea what you're talking about. How many of you can answer that question? He tall. He tall. Yeah, that's what it tells us, right? Yeah. Hopefully, if you study, it reveals a little bit more. But we have to really think about and get people caught up to see, oh, this is where you're at. This is what you're thinking about. Get your students on the same train of thought as you, get them thinking what you're thinking, and then ask the question. So can I get an oops, my bad if you failed to bring them up into the same page as you? Yeah, you've been there. You're caught up in it, but they're not there. Sometimes we fail because students aren't sure how to respond. Sometimes we ask too many questions at the same time. How are you today? And did you sleep all right? And did you remember the lesson from last week? And we just keep going, and we keep going, and we keep going. Sometimes students aren't sure if the questions are rhetorical. Am I supposed to answer that? Was that a question? Sometimes they aren't sure if they should raise their hand or if they should just talk. Can I get an oops, my bad if you've asked a question without helping students understand how to respond? Yeah, we do that one. How many? Yeah, that one's hard sometimes. Luckily, these things are easy to fix. You can fix these things. They're easy. You're probably already thinking, yeah, you can fix. You're probably already thinking the solutions through, right? Thank you. Yeah, we're thinking those through. So, if you know your mistake, you can fix it. If you're not prepared, what do? Prepare. Give yourself time. Good lesson planning takes time. Time to say, what is the lesson about? And will these questions get me there? I tell my students, when you are a new teacher and you are writing lessons, it's for every minute you are teaching, it takes about an hour of preparation. So if you are teaching a 20-minute lesson, it's probably going to take you about 20 hours of preparation when you're a new teacher. when you're a new teacher. And that's going to include studying the passage, writing your main idea, writing your objectives. Now, not all of that's going to be spent at a desk. Not all of that's going to be at a desk. You're going to study the passage. You're going to be thinking about it. You're going to be brainstorming. You're going to be having to go get the supplies for that lesson. All of that's going to be wrapped into that. But that's kind of just a general rule of thumb for when you're new. When you get more experienced, it's going to go a little bit faster. But in order to do it well when you're new, minute to hour ratio. And that is intimidating, but to do it really well. My pastor at my church says for every sermon that he preaches, he puts in probably, and he's been preaching for 15 years-ish, he puts in probably about 20 hours a week on it. He preaches through his sermon to himself. Before preaching it, he preaches that sermon to himself about 10 times before he gets up on stage and preaches it. And he's good, but it takes time. It takes time. And that's part of it too, your lesson prep. I talk to blank walls all the time as I'm preparing, practicing voice inflection and those sort of things. So, if you know your mistake is lack of preparation, take the time. Figure out where your sweet spot is on time. If you know your mistake is asking the wrong questions, don't ask the deep questions first. Make sure students understand the passage before asking the deep questions. So start with the questions like Ainsley asked. Make sure they understand the simple part before you go to something like, what does Goliath's armor reveal about him? Make sure you know who Goliath is before you get to his armor, right? Do they know who that big guy is? They know Goliath from David. Okay, yeah. We want to make sure they know that. Make sure students know if you're asking a question and how they should respond. How did I have you guys respond to me today? If you made the mistake, how did I have you respond? Oops, my bad. I made it very clear how you were supposed to respond. It's ridiculous. But you knew what you were supposed to do, right? Yeah, it's easy to do. So it's going to get a little more challenging as we keep going here this morning, but we're going to keep doing it. You guys, though, are looking like you're a little fuzzy here at this moment. You're looking a little sleepy, a little warm. Yeah? So break back out into your groups from yesterday. And take a look at your questions that you wrote and see if your questions reflect any one of these reasons we often fail. And then we're going to come back in and do good questions and talk about types of questions.
Oh boy, he's back.
If you don't have your questions, write a question. If you didn't have a question, write one. So did you guys have a question from yesterday?
No, we just said we were gonna ask questions, so we didn't create any. So now.
So you broke the lack of preparation rule. Yep. All right, so did you guys have questions yesterday? Which did they break any of the rules? Did they?
The game, like, so they,
What question did you have? No, I'd say you're good. It's a good one.
If you obey the first time, you're 8-year-olds.
That's a good one. Yeah. You might start with a deeper question, though, or with a simpler question. Because for 8-year-olds, why did Jonah get swallowed by a whale? He was hungry. The whale was hungry. Jesus? God? You got a little bit of, you're ahead of them in the book. So you got to bring them into the same page as you. So especially with 8-year-olds. Yeah, so ask them kind of the order of the story leading up to to your question. So you've got a good question, but bring them up to that point. So get them some order of the story. All right, so what question did you guys ask yesterday?
We have a couple, but like for the discussion, like when you talk about things, like ask them what like academic and spiritual takeaways are that they got from like reading the passages, maybe even before like after every time they read, kind of just ask them that. And then why don't we obey the first time? And then when we disobey, what is our turning point? And then the why don't we obey the first time is like our main driving point, and so that's going to be repeated when we ask like the thing.
Okay, question. You said you're going to ask them their academic and their spiritual takeaways.
Yeah.
Prior to coming to the anchor, would you have understood that question?
I mean, me personally, yes, but like I don't.
It might be something that you're on a different page.
Yeah, but like I think I don't know. We got that from Tony when he asked us that. Would you have understood that?
just a takeaway.
Yeah, and so he would basically, but he explained it the first time, and he just talked about like.
Right, so prepare them.
Yeah.
Prepare them for your question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and I get the gist of it because I'm in that world.
Yeah.
So that's the one if you have new people who've been invited, they're going to get asked that question. They're going to be hiding. They're not going to want to answer that question because they hear academic, they think college. So what's the college question? Like physics? Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Ainsley, you had some good questions for kids. What other questions did you have?
They can tell you. I'm just reading writing it because it's messy. Yes, it
How does this
is.
feel? Going.
It's bothering
This is for the
me.
hook. We ask, how does this
It's
feel?
just the lines of it,
It's
so
dark
it all
and
needs to
scary
be
and,
even
like, it's
lines.
How does this feel?
Yeah, like when they're in
So
the
this
parachute,
notebook,
it's, like, all dark or
it's
whatever.
5-star, and they have
Oh.
an
Like, how
app.
does this
So
feel? It's, like,
basically,
super
if
dark and
you
scary.
write notes and then
Oh.
you bubble this in, and you go on the
That
app,
might
you
be
can scan the
where
page,
you
and
failed
any
to bring them on the
line
same
that's
page.
bubbled in, it'll make it into a flashcard.
Make sure it's
like,
clear
visual
what you're
for you.
asking. How does it feel inside the parachute?
So I use them in like high school.
Add that on. How does this feel inside the parachute?
Yeah. So instead of saying how this feel, they could be hungry.
No, how does this feel like
Right.
being inside the?
Then
But see,
that's
you're on
why
that
in the
page.
parachute.
But you want them to answer about how they feel inside the parachute. So make sure they understand that's what you're asking. Because they'll be like, well, the floor is cold.
Better yet, we could always just show them VeggieTales.
VeggieTales are great, but they're not a good teacher. They're not the only teaching tool. All right, what questions did you guys ask?
We started out with how does Jonah disobey God?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Our first questions were how did Jonah disobey God and how is God loyal to Jonah? And then where is one place in your life you've seen God's loyalty and when was the time you were disobedient and had to turn back to God?
What would be a question that you could put before that leads them into that depth of question?
We started with the disobedient and loyalty here.
This is for close.
No, I just wrote them.
Oh, you just wrote them backwards?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Those are the ones we'd start with and then go to those ones.
Okay. Good. Good, good. I don't know if I want to know what's going on. All right, you guys got some questions? That's okay. Rhetorical questions. That's okay, you can have them. Let me hear them. Where you've been. Okay. Now, have you taught carefully to that point? So it's really clear. Like last night, Kyler did it really well. Very clear. This is exactly what we're talking about. And then he asked that question. So make sure that the page leads exactly to that. Otherwise, that question is going to go too deep. So if not, ask the simpler question. And then that. You don't have to have the students answer out loud. You can ask a rhetorical question. All right, what you guys got?
Kind of like the ones in the book kind of check for comprehension, and then the ones in like look and check are kind of like application and like making sure that they're getting the lesson. So like during our book, some of our like we asked them what repetitions stick out to you because there are quite a few repetitions in chapter 4 that we had read already, and then they actually look through and be like, oh.
But you see how you just had to explain that question to me?
Yeah.
Write that question better. So, do you get what I mean?
What words and phrases repeat themselves?
Yeah. Do you see instead of what repetitions? Actually explain the question. What words and phrases or what do we see happening over and over again? What words and phrases are things that we see? So write it out clearly what you mean. Because you know what you mean by repetitions.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't see the church clap in there, so I don't know what we're talking about. Yep. So yeah, great question. But that's one of those times where our vocabulary doesn't put us on the same page. All right. It is time for break. Enjoy your break. Pardon? Oh.